Imagine someone insults you in front of a room full of people. Your pulse rises. Your mind races to find the perfect comeback. Every instinct tells you to defend yourself, explain your position, or prove them wrong. Most people obey that instinct without thinking. They react, believing they are protecting their dignity, but in reality, they are surrendering it. The moment someone can predict your emotional response, they have begun to influence your behavior. And influence is the first step toward control. This is one of the oldest principles of power. Human beings are emotional creatures who like to believe they are rational. We tell ourselves that our reactions are justified, that our anger is necessary, that our explanations will finally make people understand us. Yet history repeatedly shows the opposite. The individuals who left the greatest impression were rarely the loudest voices in the room. They were often the calmest. They possessed an unusual ability to remain composed, while everyone else became consumed by emotion. Their silence was not weakness, it was discipline. When someone provokes you, what are they really seeking? Rarely is it the truth. More often, they are seeking access to your emotional state. The angry coworker, the manipulative friend, the jealous rival, even the stranger on the internet. They all understand something about human psychology. If they can make you react emotionally, they have shifted your attention away from your purpose and toward their agenda. You are no longer choosing your actions, they are choosing them for you. That is why emotional control is more than patience. It is a form of independence. It is the ability to decide that your emotions belong to you, not to the circumstances created by other people. Notice how easily crowds lose this ability. One rumor spreads, and thousands react before verifying the facts. One criticism appears online, and people rush to defend themselves. One disrespectful comment is enough to ruin an entire day. This pattern repeats because our minds are wired to respond to threats. Thousands of years ago, reacting quickly increased the chances of survival. But in modern life, many threats are psychological rather than physical. They are attacks on the ego, not on our safety. Yet the brain often responds as though both are equally dangerous. The truly disciplined individual recognizes this difference. They pause before speaking. They allow emotions to settle before making decisions. That brief moment of silence becomes a powerful advantage because most people never take it. While others become prisoners of impulse, they remain architects of intention. This does not mean suppressing every emotion or pretending not to care. Emotions are valuable signals. Anger may reveal injustice. Fear may reveal risk. Disappointment may reveal expectations that need adjustment. The mistake is allowing those emotions to dictate immediate action. There is an enormous difference between feeling an emotion and obeying it. Think about the people who seem impossible to manipulate. They are not emotionless. They simply refuse to let others choose when and how those emotions are expressed. They have learned that every reaction carries information. Your frustration tells people what bothers you. Your defensiveness tells them where your insecurities lie. Your desperation reveals what you fear losing. Every unnecessary reaction becomes free intelligence for those who wish to understand or exploit you. Silence, on the other hand, reveals very little. When you refuse to react immediately, something fascinating happens. The other person begins reacting instead. They become uncomfortable with the uncertainty. They expected resistance, excuses, or emotional chaos. Instead, they encounter calm. Human beings naturally try to fill silence with assumptions. They wonder what you are thinking. They question whether their strategy failed. The psychological balance quietly shifts. This is why composed individuals often appear more confident than they actually feel. Confidence is not always the absence of fear. Often, it is simply the refusal to let fear become visible. The world judges composure long before it discovers competence. People trust those who remain steady under pressure because stability suggests strength. Consider how often opportunities are lost because of emotional impatience. A careless argument ends a valuable relationship. A moment of anger damages years of reputation. A defensive explanation creates more suspicion than the original accusation ever could. Most regret begins not with careful thought, but with impulsive reaction. The wiser approach is remarkably simple. Slow yourself down when criticized, resist the urge to answer immediately. When praised, resist becoming intoxicated by approval. When provoked, observe before responding. When emotions become intense, remember that clarity rarely exists in the middle of emotional storms. Time has a remarkable way of separating truth from temporary feeling. There is another benefit to this discipline that few people discuss. Emotional control strengthens your sense of identity. If your mood constantly depends on how others treat you, then your emotional life is being managed by strangers. But when you decide that your peace will no longer be determined by another person's opinion, insult, or approval, you reclaim ownership of your inner world. That is genuine freedom. People often mistake this attitude for indifference. It is not indifference. It is selectivity. You simply become more careful about what deserves your emotional investment. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every disagreement deserves an argument. Not every misunderstanding deserves an explanation. Your energy is limited. Every unnecessary reaction is an invisible expense paid from a finite account. Eventually, people begin to notice this change. They realize they cannot easily provoke you. They recognize that emotional manipulation no longer works. Some will respect you more. Others may become frustrated because they have lost access to your emotions. Either outcome is useful because both reveal people's true intentions. Real power is rarely dramatic. It does not announce itself through shouting, revenge, or endless debate. It appears in quiet moments when every instinct demands a reaction, yet you choose restraint instead. In those moments, you prove something far more important than intelligence or charisma. You prove mastery over yourself. And remember this, the person who controls your reactions controls your life, but the moment you master your emotions, you become someone that no one can easily control. Once you have learned to control your reactions, you arrive at a second lesson that is even more difficult to master. It is the temptation to explain yourself. Most people believe that if they simply say enough, clarify enough, defend themselves enough, others will finally understand their intentions. But human psychology rarely works that way. In many situations, the more you explain, the less authority you appear to possess. Every unnecessary explanation subtly communicates that you need permission, acceptance, or validation. And the moment you seek validation from everyone, you quietly surrender your independence. Think about how often people feel compelled to justify their decisions. They explain why they changed careers, why they ended a relationship, why they declined an invitation, why they set a boundary, or why they chose a different path in life. They assume that if others disagree, the solution is simply to provide more reasons. Yet the irony is that people who have already decided to misunderstand you are rarely persuaded by additional explanations. Instead, they often treat every new sentence as another opportunity to question your judgment. This is because explanations are not always evaluated logically. They are interpreted psychologically. When someone senses uncertainty behind your words, they focus less on your reasoning and more on your hesitation. They begin asking more questions, looking for contradictions, testing your confidence. Before long, the conversation is no longer about your original decision. It has become a negotiation over whether you are allowed to make that decision in the first place. Powerful individuals understand something that most people overlook. They allow their choices to stand on their own. They recognize that confidence is often communicated through brevity. A simple answer delivered with calm certainty carries more weight than a lengthy defense filled with anxiety. This is not because silence magically convinces people. It is because certainty attracts respect, while constant justification often invites doubt. Consider the individuals who naturally command attention. They do not rush to defend every criticism. They do not feel obligated to answer every accusation. They understand that public opinion changes constantly, and chasing every misunderstanding is an endless pursuit. Instead, they remain focused on the consistency of their actions. Over time, actions create a reputation that explanations never could. Human beings are fascinated by mystery. We instinctively assign greater value to what is not fully revealed. This principle appears everywhere. A book becomes more intriguing when it leaves certain questions unanswered. A work of art invites deeper reflection when every detail is not explained. Even conversations become more memorable when someone knows exactly when to stop speaking. The same principle applies to your personal life. When you reveal every thought, every plan, every emotion, and every justification, there is little left for others to discover. Familiarity can reduce curiosity. Predictability often reduces influence. But when you become selective about what you share, people naturally become more attentive. They observe your behavior more carefully because they cannot rely on endless explanations to interpret you. This does not mean becoming secretive or deceptive. There is an important difference between protecting your privacy and manipulating others. The goal is not to create confusion. The goal is to recognize that your life does not require constant public approval. Some decisions belong only to you. Some ambitions are better protected while they are still developing. Some victories are stronger when announced only after they have already been achieved. History repeatedly demonstrates this pattern. Many successful individuals quietly worked for years before revealing the results of their efforts. They understood that premature explanation often invites unnecessary criticism. Every dream discussed too early becomes vulnerable to the opinions of people who have never attempted something similar. Every plan exposed before it matures risks being weakened by doubt. There is another psychological reason to explain less. Words create expectations. The more promises you make, the more opportunities people have to measure your progress against those promises. But when your actions consistently exceed your words, your credibility grows naturally. People begin trusting what they see rather than what they hear. This is why restraint is such an underrated form of confidence. Imagine entering a disagreement where everyone is competing to speak louder, defend themselves more passionately, and prove they are right. The instinct is to join the competition. Yet the individual who calmly states their position once, without emotional urgency, often appears more grounded than everyone else. They communicate that their confidence does not depend on winning every argument. Not everyone deserves an explanation. This realization can be uncomfortable because many of us were taught that politeness requires endless justification. But maturity teaches a different lesson. Respecting others does not require abandoning your own boundaries. You can be kind without being overly accommodating. You can be respectful without making every decision a public debate. There will always be people who misunderstand your motives. Some misunderstand intentionally because it benefits them. Others misunderstand because they view the world through experiences completely different from yours. If you spend your life trying to eliminate every misunderstanding, you will never have enough time to build the life you actually want. Instead, ask yourself a different question. Does this explanation serve a meaningful purpose, or am I simply trying to make everyone comfortable with a decision that is already mine to make? That question changes everything. As you become more disciplined, you will notice another shift. Your conversations become calmer. Your words become more deliberate. People begin listening more carefully because they recognize that you do not speak merely to fill silence. Every sentence carries intention. Every decision reflects thought rather than insecurity. Ironically, saying less often makes your words more memorable. Scarcity creates value. Constant explanation creates noise. The world is already filled with people competing to justify themselves. The rare individual is the one who quietly lives according to their principles without demanding universal approval. This mindset also prepares you for the next level of psychological strength. Once you stop reacting emotionally and stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, you free your attention from battles that never deserved it in the first place. You begin to understand that your focus is your greatest resource, and not every person or situation deserves access to it. That realization naturally leads to the final lesson, the strategic power of choosing what and whom to ignore. So remember this: your life is not a courtroom, and you are not required to defend every decision. Let your character speak through your actions, because the strongest explanation is a life that no longer needs one. If you have learned to master your reactions and resist the constant urge to explain yourself, there is one final discipline that transforms those habits into genuine personal power. It is the ability to ignore strategically. Most people misunderstand the word ignore. They associate it with arrogance, coldness, or indifference. But strategic indifference is something entirely different. It is the conscious decision to protect your attention from people, situations, and conflicts that offer no meaningful return. It is the realization that your attention is your most valuable resource, and wherever it goes, your life follows. Think about the modern world for a moment. Every day, thousands of voices compete for your focus. News headlines demand urgency. Social media rewards outrage. Arguments spread faster than thoughtful conversations. Someone always wants your opinion, your reaction, your defense, or your participation. It is no coincidence that so many people feel mentally exhausted. They are fighting battles they never needed to enter. They are carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs to begin with. The truly disciplined individual understands something that most people overlook. Not every invitation deserves acceptance. Not every criticism deserves a response. Not every insult deserves acknowledgement. Sometimes the greatest display of confidence is simply continuing your journey without turning around to answer every voice calling your name. Consider how manipulation often begins. Rarely does it start with force. It begins with distraction. Someone provokes you with an offensive remark. Someone questions your abilities. Someone spreads a rumor, hoping you will become consumed by defending yourself. Before long, your attention shifts away from your own goals and becomes entirely focused on their behavior. Without realizing it, they have succeeded. They may not have changed your beliefs, but they have redirected your energy. This is why attention is a form of currency. Every minute you spend obsessing over people who contribute nothing to your growth is a minute that cannot be invested in your future. Time is limited, energy is limited, emotional capacity is limited. Every unnecessary conflict quietly withdraws from those accounts. Notice how people react when they fail to receive the attention they expected. Many become uncomfortable. Some become louder. Others escalate their behavior in an attempt to provoke a response. Human beings naturally seek acknowledgement because acknowledgement validates significance. When someone can no longer influence your emotions or redirect your attention, they often feel powerless. This is why strategic silence frequently unsettles manipulative personalities more than any clever argument ever could. There is an interesting psychological principle at work here. The human mind often assigns greater importance to what it cannot easily obtain. We become curious about people who remain focused despite distractions. We respect individuals who refuse to abandon their principles for temporary emotional victories. Their consistency creates an invisible form of authority because it demonstrates that their priorities are stronger than external pressure. This does not mean ignoring legitimate problems. Wisdom requires knowing the difference between avoidance and discernment. Ignoring responsibility weakens character. Ignoring manipulation strengthens it. Ignoring constructive criticism limits growth. Ignoring pointless negativity protects peace. The challenge is learning to distinguish between the two. Ask yourself a simple question whenever conflict appears. Will responding improve the situation, or will it merely satisfy my emotions for a few moments? That single question has the power to prevent countless unnecessary arguments. Many people believe respect is earned by proving themselves in every confrontation. Yet genuine respect often comes from emotional consistency rather than constant victory. Imagine two individuals. One argues with everyone who disagrees. The other remains calm, speaks only when necessary, and quietly continues building a meaningful life. Over time, which person appears stronger? The answer is rarely determined by who won more arguments. It is determined by who maintained greater control over their direction. Purpose naturally simplifies life. When you know where you are going, distractions become easier to recognize. Every successful individual eventually discovers that saying no is just as important as saying yes. Every unnecessary commitment delays an important one. Every pointless debate steals focus from meaningful work. There is another truth that becomes clearer with experience. Many conflicts solve themselves when you refuse to feed them. Gossip fades when it no longer receives attention. Petty rivalries lose momentum when participation disappears. Provocations become ineffective when they no longer produce emotional rewards. Sometimes silence accomplishes what endless confrontation never could. This discipline also changes your relationships. You become more selective about the people you allow into your emotional world. Instead of chasing approval, you begin valuing peace. Instead of trying to impress everyone, you invest your energy in those who genuinely respect your character. You realize that maturity is not measured by how many people admire you, but by how wisely you choose those whose opinions truly matter. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they must always have the final word. They imagine that the last sentence determines who wins. But life is not a debate competition. The strongest position is often demonstrated through action rather than conversation. While others remain trapped in endless cycles of proving themselves, you quietly move forward. Progress becomes your response. Growth becomes your argument. Success becomes your explanation. As this mindset develops, something remarkable happens internally. You begin experiencing a freedom that cannot be purchased or given by anyone else. Your peace no longer depends on unanimous approval. Your confidence no longer rises and falls with public opinion. You stop measuring your worth through reactions from strangers. Instead, your attention returns to the only place where lasting power has ever existed, your own character. That is where all three lessons come together. First, you refuse to react because your emotions belong to you. Second, you refuse to explain unnecessarily because your actions speak more clearly than endless words. Finally, you refuse to waste your attention because your purpose is too valuable to sacrifice for distractions. When these disciplines become habits, people notice something different about you. They may not immediately understand it, but they recognize a quiet strength. They see someone who cannot be easily provoked, manipulated, or distracted. They see someone whose confidence comes from self-mastery rather than public approval. That kind of presence is rare because it is built slowly, through daily choices that most people never make. So as you leave with these ideas, remember this simple truth. Every reaction gives away a piece of your power. Every unnecessary explanation weakens your authority, and every meaningless distraction steals a piece of your future. Guard your emotions, guard your words, above all, guard your attention, because the life you create will always follow the focus you choose to protect.